I really believe I'm being challenged right now because the two entities that I value most, my family and my faith,
Yes.
are showing what is really at the heart of us as humans. You know, the man,
Yeah.
the flesh,
Yes.
the flesh side, and I have to deal with this. And I really felt like it was God's opportunity to let me see that I too can be that way. I can forget. I can not know something. I cannot be aware. And I needed to reconcile that. And I needed to fight the fleshly desire to lash out. Because those are
That's your
just
child. Yes.
two big instances. Many others happened. And as a mommy, I had to really be challenged by that. I also had to look at how it was affecting my daughters. Comments like that don't go unheard. And little girls want to be accepted by their family and by their friends. And when they're not being accepted because of something that's outside of their control, but yet is so near and dear to them. And I needed to make sure that, though I didn't want to be on display, that my reactions were held in check. And that was really challenging.
Wow, I bet.
I can't say that I always reacted appropriately, but I tried really hard to stifle how painful it was. My poor husband, he would come home from the golf course and I would lament, and he would be like, well, just don't go anymore. Don't be around those people. And I said, but that doesn't solve anything. But he didn't want me to hurt. He didn't want me to hurt. He didn't want my children to hurt. And so we had to muster some of those things. And then came school. And
this is where your fight comes in.
This is where the
and
big
you
fight
fight
came.
for your son.
Big
all
fight
the
came.
way.
We lived in a school where a district that had neighborhood schools still at the time, and I was a product of public education. I wanted my children, I had big visions, you know, the little matching pail, lunch pail, and backpack, and we're all going to, the big yellow bus is going to pull up, and we're going to take the photos. And of course, those first days, you're going to follow the bus to the school and make sure that everybody arrives okay and maybe hide in the bushes, which I did. And you have all these visions of grandeur, and then reality hits. And I was introduced to an entire new language, you know, IEP and goals and present levels of performance and, of course, deficits. And I was told, well, this is how we do things, you know. One professional after another calling me saying, well, you know, we're going to send him across town and he's going to go uptown. And we have this nice little program that works really well for us. And I said, but that's a 45-minute bus ride, one way.
Crazy.
And we don't live in that neighborhood. And we have a school in our backyard. Well, your daughter will go to that school, but your son, it would be better for him to go here. He'll be comfortable here. And I said, but we're not looking for comfort. We're looking for challenge.
Yes.
He needs to learn how to read, and his neighbor friends need to know him.
Education and
Yeah,
friendships.
they need to know him, because if they see him suddenly on the weekends and they've never seen him during the week, he's going to be that strange boy that is out and nobody's going to want to talk to him. And I said, well, that's really nice that you offer that, but that's not going to work for us.
Yes.
Oh, well, no, this is what we do. I said, well, this isn't what we do. I said, we would like to go to our neighborhood school. Well, he would need an aide, and we don't do aides. And I said, well, we do. We need an aide. And you see, the way I looked at it, I said, you know, I called to find out how much funding you get for that diagnosis that you had me sign off on, and you get a lot of money.
Wow.
And you see, I think it's really important that you give the taxpayers a good return on their investment.
Hello.
I said, because if my neighbors are investing in the education of my son, I want one day for them to go, I helped educate him.
Awesome.
I helped that young man that's working right now. I made sure he wasn't sitting on the couch.
Exactly.
Or if Samuel's abilities showed that he wasn't capable of working, I made sure that that young man was able to get out there and volunteer in his community. I made sure that he is able to associate and assimilate with his peers and with his community. I said, it's really important to me as a mother that we are not always takers, but we are givers.
I love how you did not settle. Praise God. Like you fought, and so many women, I'm sure, and I don't know, you would know more. Do some moms just settle and say, oh, you know, oh, well, we'll send our child off 45 minutes away?
Yes,
know?
because it's
they don't
very
know.
intimidating. And
Yes,
you
have to
don't
be
know
strong.
what you don't know.
Right.
And if you don't ask the right question, you don't get the answers. And
God directed you.
Yes, and God put people in my
As a
path.
trailblazer.
Well-meaning teachers. It wasn't the teachers. I met lots and lots of teachers, and that's a whole nother meet and greet. But wonderful teachers that said, you're not off base. We're not ready to handle this. And I understood that. I empathized with it. And so it was a fight. And I remember I had to bring in the coalition And they said, well, this is how it's going to go. And I said, but what if I ask for these services? And what if I show them why these are necessary? And they agree. And they said, no, it doesn't work that way. You're going to have to go to arbitration, and and I said, but what if we don't? What if they agree? Well, I was told by somebody, never go into an IEP meeting alone. So I felt rather than inviting one person, maybe I should invite 10. And they all showed up.
Wow, that's awesome.
I didn't know. Again, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was just trying. I thought, I need to have enough witnesses to vouch for the fact that we need to present a good front starting out. Because less money spent now or more money spent now will be less money spent later.
Yes.
And we can make a difference not only for one child, but for many children.
Yes.
And so there we were in this little fishbowl, and I think they were expecting about 4 people to show up at that first IEP meeting. And the room was everyone seated around this table, a second row of people standing behind the table, and people filtering out into the hallway. And several people showed up and stood outside the window. And you would have thought that it was like a press conference or something going on. And when we left, all of the services that we had requested for that first year were provided. No arguing, no disagreements.
Wow, that's amazing.
And we walked out and the coalition said, I don't even know what to say. You didn't need us here. And I said, no, I did need you here. I said, but this happened. Well, in theory, on paper, things look so much different than what they do in real life.
Wow.
And we ran into a situation where an individual was given the job as the aide, who was given the job simply because of the union position. She then later professed, I don't like boys. I have photographs of bruises on Samuel as a result of her forcing him physically.
This person bruised your son?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
And it took 2 years to get that person moved from that position and get a different aide in. Again, we just hired whoever was next in the list. And I kept saying, why are we not hiring what's best for this particular student? We could maximize this dollar spending here by making sure that this person could not only work with my son, but also work with other children in the classroom.
Yeah.
No, they hired somebody that would just go fill in for the cafeteria worker or go fill in for the office secretary.
Not even necessary.
And I'm going, this is ridiculous. I volunteered, I went up and helped, and teachers, well-meaning, would let me know ahead of time, hey, this is what's going on. And I said, this is ridiculous. I was doing so much teaching at home, or, being told, I know that you want him to learn how to read, but he's not going to learn how to read. And I said, he's going to learn how to read.
Yes.
And we need to, Tera, the director of special ed, said to me at one point, Tera, we have all the way until he graduates to teach him how to read. Let's just keep him comfortable right now. And I said, you know what? Comfort is overrated. I said, if my daughters are expected to read and his peers are expected to read, I said, we're going to teach him until there's nothing left to teach and he has determined that he's incapable. We're not going to look at the individual and determine that. Now, if I, as the parent, said, you know what, it is getting too taxing and we've got necessary documentation, we could determine that. So finally, at the end of second grade, after some bullying, some situations that were very not good, I pulled Samuel out of public school. I had gone to the superintendent at that time, to the superintendent, and I said, your schools are ranked failing. I have 3 children, 2 typical developing learners who are getting you good marks on your school report card, and a child with a disability who also through the alternative assessment is getting you good marks on your report card. Tell me why I should stay. And his response was, maybe you would be better served elsewhere.
Wow.
And I said, okay.
Yeah.
So I enrolled my children in the virtual online charter school. And that is when I learned how to advocate for my children. The state wanted to take away virtual options. I went down to the State House, dragged my children down. We made signs, we protested, we rallied, and we were able to keep funding for virtual education. One of the most remarkable curriculums I've ever seen through that virtual program. My oldest daughter thrived. By the time she went to private school, which we did enact a voucher for her to go when she got to middle school age, she was 2 years ahead of her private school peers.
Wow.
So
which program was that then?
That was through a virtual school.
Is it like a certain...
Ohio Virtual Academy.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Did phenomenal. My younger daughter, same thing. She was up by 7, done with school by noon. She was a go-getter. Now, the other one was a late riser, and she would school in the afternoon.
But that's
phenomenal. Yeah, it was.
that's the joy
what.
of it.
Yeah,
And
you
the
know,
convenience of it.
a wise
Yeah.
person once said to me, "Never let school interfere with your child's education."
Yes.
And I remind myself that of all the time, even as an adult. Never let school or traditional concepts interfere with your education,
awesome.
because
There's so many avenues.
Oh my
and for
goodness.
every person, they're all, we're all different.
Yes,
and
and
we learn differently.
Yes,
and all
and
those
you
things.
approach things differently, and you have different time clocks within you. And some people work well in the morning, and some
Yes.
people are night owls. And
Yep.
I think that that's why we have 3 different shifts generally on a
Yes,
workforce.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
the day,
That's
the middle,
awesome,
and the end.
yes.
And so those 2 programs work very well. My oldest daughter ended up going into the private school because we saw where she was needing that interaction, that more social. She wanted to do sports, so we enacted that. My younger daughter was becoming more reclusive, and that was concerning us. Now, if I would have done a little bit more digging, I would have been like, no, she would have found her niche. But I was like, I need to get her out a little bit. In the meantime, I had Samuel. And though I was educating him at home, it was taking me about 16 hours a day on that advanced curriculum.
Wow.
I had a special needs teacher that I met from Delaware. Melissa was phenomenal. Unbelievable. She used to work for a public school, and then she switched over to the virtual school when she started having children. And this woman was a dynamo.
Wow.
And she was one of the first teachers who really got what a functional learning program concept was. And she took me to Panera one day, and she said, I want you to tell me what would be the best academic setting for a child like your son. For a child with intellectual disabilities, what do you see? And we sat there for 7 hours at a Panera, and we wrote a plan.
Wow.
And she said, I don't know if this is possible. And I said, I found this curriculum, but I can't afford it. And I can find a way to afford it. I can raise funds for it, but tell me if you think this would work. And I was looking for validation from an expert, from a
Yes,
professional
that this can work.
that had done this and that I wasn't crazy. And she said, we'll see. So we piloted that program. We convinced the charter school, the online charter school, to pilot that program, that hands-on learning experience, even though that was completely foreign to what they did. Wow. They are virtual setting, but they had a litany of children with intellectual disabilities and various learning abilities, and this was a curriculum that was differentiated. So there were 4 or 5 different levels. So depending upon where the student fit, it was all hands-on. You could make it as hands-on as you wanted, but I mean, every lesson, every single course had the implement of hands-on learning in it. Very concrete, and it worked. Awesome. We did that for a year, and then she went on her way, and I got a phone call. Or I made a phone call, actually. I made a phone call, and I said, down to the state house, and I said, School Choice Ohio. I asked them, I said, there's vouchers for children to go to private schools or to specialized schooling. There's schools for children with autism and on the spectrum. But for anybody else with any other disability, there's no options. You either go to your public school, and I said my public school said, and get nothing. I said they'd redirect the funds constantly. They're redirecting funds to other avenues as opposed to the children. And I said, what can we do? And they said, well, tell us your story. And I told them our story, and they said, actually, there's a bill up for debate. And would you be willing to come down and tell your story to the Senate? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. I can come down. So we wrote up a 5-minute little blurb of his educational, and I grabbed this. Sorry, I almost spilled this.
Fine.
I grabbed this off my wall. This photograph of our family at the time, off the wall at my house, and that was that green.
This is my family.
I know,
this is
and
what
I
I'm
did.
fighting
I
for.
remember walking up. I grabbed my children because I was homeschooling them all at the time. And I grabbed their spelling lessons and their vocabulary lessons, and I gave a spelling test in the minivan on the way down, and I parked them in the hallway outside the Senate chamber, and I gave them their vocabulary words, and they were helping each other, and I marched in there, and I sat there diligently waiting for my turn, and I felt as though I was going before the high court. Everybody's sitting on their bench, and I thought, what am I doing here? I don't even know what I'm doing here. And I just thought, okay, I got to go tell them my story, but they're not going to want to hear my story. These were the things that were going through my mind, that they're not going to want to hear this. This is just me and my child up in Mansfield.
God has brought you here for such a time as that.
Yeah. And so I got up there and I shared my story, and 2 of the gentlemen sitting on the bench followed me out after I spoke, and one of them had tears streaming down his face. And he said, it was so great to see a face to that story.
Wow.
And to know that the decision that I make could change the trajectory of that child's outcome. And he said, I thank you so much for coming and sharing your
Now,
story.
who was that guy? Like, was
You know
he
what?
a rep?
He was
or
a senator.
A senator.
He was a senator. I don't
Okay.
remember his name. It was back in
Wow.
2008.
But
it was
that's
a long time
awesome.
ago. And the bill passed.
Praise God.
And the governor vetoed it at the time. And
you're in Ohio.
I was in
then.
Ohio, yeah. And I asked my husband.
All that
he
work.
said all that work, and there's so many other parents too. I mean, there was a whole room full of us, and so we went back to work, And I told him, let me know if anything happens. And so we pledged along, and it came before the House. The bill came up again the following year. Now it's 2009. My daughter's in private school, and I'm still wondering, is there a way that we can educate Sam so that he can be in a small-sized classroom with functional learning, standards-based, still
Yes.
learning the same things his sisters are learning.
At his level.
At his level. The bill went to vote again, and there was a malfunction with the voting buttons. And so the bill went down again. And my husband said, Tara, it's time to give up on this. He said, we don't have the money for you to keep driving to Columbus. You're not working. I'm the only one working. I'm working overtime. The kids need schooled. And I said, if there's a way that this ever comes up again, I have to be ready because we need to be able to help other people.
You're trailblazing. That's what you were doing.
Well,
by God's grace and providence.
I didn't know it at the
Yes,
time,
of
but
course.
that's what was happening. And so then we just kept on educating. And every day when I would take the girls to school, Samuel would sit in the seat with me, and he would say to me, Mom, I would really like to go to school here. And I said, I know, buddy, but they don't have a program here
This
for you.
is at the Christian school,
This is
right?
at the Christian
Private
school.
Christian
And he
school.
said, but I'll go back in the 3rd grade if they would let me come here and learn. And it broke my heart every day. And in my heart of hearts, I was like, this is not the right place for him because they don't have a special education program. They have a program that they're doing for individuals with autism, but it wasn't as intense as what I wanted. And so we kept forging ahead. And I'll never forget, in February of 2011, it was a Monday afternoon, I got a phone call from the State House. And they said, hey, Tera, our speaker is in Europe, and they're going to have a press conference in the morning. And we were wondering if you wouldn't mind coming down and speaking at the press conference. They're going to reintroduce the bill. And I was like, what? And they said, yeah, we just need you to come down. We've invited a couple other parents who are part of EdChoice, and we wondered if you would come down and represent individuals with special needs. This is a specific special needs scholarship. And I said, I'll be there. Wow. So on the way down to the State House, I called that teacher in Delaware, and I had Samuel in tow, and we were heading down, and I had my phone set up on my dashboard, and I spoke my speech into my phone while I drove, and she typed, and she had it waiting for me at the podium. And that was in February. And in June, yeah,
That's
in
awesome.
June of that year, we were on vacation, and there had been rallies and, oh my gosh, days that I went down to the State House and sat there for 12 hours.
Oh my.
No food, no
Oh
drink.
my.
Had to go to the bathroom, but I didn't want to get up because I knew that if they called my name, that was it. Chairs that I swear were built in
my
1600.
gosh.
And I thought there couldn't be anything more uncomfortable
my
than this.
gosh.
And
price
so
you've
there was
paid.
all of that, and my husband saying, you're not going another time to testify. And I would take money out of the food envelope and move it over into the gas envelope because, it was a lot of driving, and gas was $4 a gallon at the
Oh, my
time.
gosh.
It was during that time when gas was so expensive, and I
Wow.
just kept sneaking, and I felt so guilty, and I did ask God for forgiveness
Oh,
on that.
he
and I
he
told
was on your side.
I did tell my husband, I confessed it later. I said, honey, I was robbing the food money to
It's
get us
like,
to
well,
Columbus.
it was worth it.
And we were on vacation in Arkansas, and I remember sitting at my laptop early in the morning. One morning I got up and I thought, the vote happened yesterday, and I prayed over it, and I opened it up, and there was this big banner that came across that email that said, you did it. And it was sent out to all the moms and the families,
You
and
did
that
it.
bill passed.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that bill passed. Yeah.
Praise
And,
God. That is awesome.
I was so excited. I was so excited. And what I forgot to tell you was that when after that press conference, clear back in February, when I was leaving the State House, I thought, oh my gosh, this could actually happen. I just really felt in my gut that it was going to happen this time.
Yes.
And as I was driving back from Columbus, all of a sudden we hit stopped traffic, and I'm stuck in traffic, and I was like, oh, this bill's going to pass, and there's nowhere for my son to go to school in Richland County. Like,
So now
there's no
what?
functional
Yeah.
learning program. And immediately I had this still small voice come over me that said, you need to call the school where your girls go. And I was like,
Oh yeah, I remember this
oh,
story.
yeah,
This is
for
so
real. I'm like,
funny.
I can't call them. They don't have a special education department. They don't even have a special education program. I'm like, that's not going to work. I'm not calling them. No, you need to call them. And I'm like, I'm not calling them. I
So
literally
you're
am having this
arguing with God.
audible
Yes.
conversation with God. And I'm like, Lord, I am not going to make this phone call. This would be ridiculous. I don't want to go there. I already went there years ago. And they said, well, that's really nice and all, but we don't have the resources. We're a small
Yes.
school. That would take so much funding, and we'd have to design that program. And I'm like, okay, well, all right. And I argued audibly. And I remember looking over, and the guy in the car next to me was looking at me like,
This lady's
I'm
crazy.
not sure if I should call for help or not. I mean, it was like he thought, the lady, it's just a traffic jam,
She's
but you need to get
whacked out.
control of yourself. So that went on for about 45 minutes, and finally, the Lord said, we're not leaving until
you do what I
relent.
told you and obey.
So I did. I picked up the phone and I said, fine, I'll call. And I asked, could I have a meeting? And yes, if you can get here by 3:00. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm sitting in traffic, but I'll see what I can do. And as soon as I hung up the phone, the traffic started to move. And I bawled for like the next 6 miles because I thought, oh my gosh, I was just now being so disobedient. And
So God was telling you, make this call, and you're arguing. You're like, no, I'm not. Yes, call. So and the traffic is totally stopped. And then as soon as you made that phone call and obeyed the Lord, the traffic moved, and you're on your way
yes.
to many victories.
Oh my
That
goodness.
is so. And so then you go to this school and you set up.
I did. I went to
get
the school.
everything.
I
Yeah.
talked to them and I said, hey, there's this bill that's on. And
And you had to fight through that because they weren't going to do
well,
it.
he was just like, I don't know that you know what you're talking about. I mean, I'm going to have to check into this, Tara. I mean, I appreciate you coming in. And I said, you know what? That's fine. I said, God told me to come and talk to you today. And, I quite frankly, I didn't want to do it.
Yes.
And, I know it sounds like a long shot. And, well, I'll have to do some checking. I'll get back with you. And it was about a couple days to a week later, he called me up and he said, I did some checking, and it appears as though this might actually be legit.
Huh,
And I'm like,
imagine
well, imagine that.
Yeah,
And he said, maybe I could give you a minute at the board meeting. And I went into the board meeting, and I presented to them my plan that I wrote with that teacher. And I said, you know what? I don't know if this is going to come to pass, but God told me to come and talk to you guys. I didn't want to.
And the thing is, this is a Christian school.
It's a Christian school.
They better be listening to God.
Well, and they were listening, but
But
it's
they
one of
didn't
those
understand,
things.
yeah.
It's a school that was predominantly college prep. This is a foreign entity.
Yes, a whole new
people
thing.
are afraid of change.
Yep.
People are afraid of things they don't know.
Yep.
Society, and it's a hard thing because you want to get angry about these things, but we also, again, just like I did back in those two other instances, as angry as I wanted to get over the lack of immediate embrace, I also had to sit there and say, how often am I cautioned over something that is foreign to me?
Yes.
I am cautioned
right.
all the time. So in my spirit, I am saddened, but I'm also realistic in saying, how would I act any differently than this? And so I had to tread lightly. I had to swallow my humanistic feelings a lot. I had to go into the closet many times and ask forgiveness for times that I so ugly was faced with that same behavior. It was, you just...
And then you have grace for those who...
You do, and
like you said, they don't know what they don't know.
You just don't know.
Yeah.
And, I couldn't fault it. And I thought, if this is the only experience that you've ever had, how can you be expected to have any other reaction? So the bill got passed in June. The board agreed that they would do it. And I saved that email. I saved everything. I have a wonderful
awesome.
scrapbook of all of the little victories that God gave us. And I was elated at what this meant for other families,
Awesome.
of what this meant.
Yes.
I knew that for me, I couldn't focus on everyone else's need. I felt as though the Lord used our family to open the door for all these other
Yes.
families to fight for their child.
Yes, for their education.
Yes.
And as a human being.
To
Not
fight
just, like
and
you
say-
said, they were going to just stick him in a room with a coloring book.
Yeah, with a
And
jungle
just
gym and say,
whatever.
"Oh, be happy."
Yeah.
And I said, "This is not okay." And I don't know every other family's need. I don't know
Right.
every other family's hurt. I don't
Right.
know every other. But what I did know was that now they were saying, we as a community, as a state, are going to provide for children with special needs for their parents and their team to collaborate together to choose where that child would best be educated.
Yes.
What a victory. I mean,
Yes.
it had nothing to do with the Myers family, it had nothing to do with Tara or Samuel. It had everything to do with the fact that every child had the
His
opportunity to be
worth.
valued, their worth.
Exactly.
And I was
So-
elated over that.
So now, so we'll kind of fast forward a little
Yes.
bit. So you get to, God has used you from the time you're pregnant with this precious, special child,
Save his life, yeah.
saved his life. You fought for his education. And there's many cherries on this banana split here.
Yeah.
There's cherries, many of them. But so I'm excited. So kind of let's move then into what the ultimate place you get to go. And then we'll also bring in your son too, and we'll let him
Yes.
share. So share how you got to go to
Well, yeah, after
the
after
highest
we
place of the land.
after we continued to, start a program, people heard our story. Legislators heard our story. Some people in Washington, D.C. I spoke at a dinner in 2012, the year that we started the program. Samuel, they did a documentary in the state of Ohio on the passage of the Peterson program and on Sam's story. And so Samuel and I were invited to Washington, D.C. To speak. Samuel met with the Speaker of the House, former Paul Ryan. The former speaker. He went to do some interview training, and he was invited to go to the confirmation hearing of the Secretary of Education, Secretary DeVos, who, I don't care what anybody says. I have to say that education should not be a political piece.
No.
It should be. This is about every child.
Yes.
This is not about politics.
Exactly.
And I find it very disheartening that where we're at the state that we're in regards to education, in regards to race, in regards to people, just people.
Yes.
I just find this so disheartening because, unfortunately, it's a systematic issue that we need to deal with. But there was a lot of, unless you've been in those situations, unless you get to those places and you get to see what happens behind the scenes, it's really difficult to understand what really goes on. And we were invited to go to that confirmation hearing, and oh my gosh, the tension and the stress there. But I'm going to tell you, a very godly woman is sitting there who loves children.
DeVos.
Yes.
Yes.
Who loves children, who loves families, who loves teachers, and wants options.
That's awesome.
And wants to shrink the size of the federal reach on education and turn that back over to the families
Yes.
and the teachers.
Where it should be.
Where it should be. This should be about
Yes.
children. And instead we've got
Exactly.
unions fighting for power and control. And, they're not even collectively
Yes.
taking great care for
Exactly.
their teachers. They're unfortunately, our teachers are used a lot
Yes.
as pawns.
Yep.
It's very disheartening to me
Yes.
because our teachers are dynamite.
Yes,
I mean,
we have
we've
some
got